Okay, got it. All right. Recorded. There we go. Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Tiffany Fontenot, and I'm here from We Are Lit, and we have a special guest today. Everybody, this is Jonathan Beatty. He's from ilovebooks.org, and we are here today to talk about his article that was in Newsweek in terms of literacy, and then we also just want to talk about the state of advocacy in terms of literacy and some other ideas that we have. If you, his article is The Challenge of Defeating Illiteracy in America, and we'll just jump in and get started with some things. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to have you here. So normally when we start conversations, I like to just, even before we jump into your article, I just want to talk about you for a minute and understand your literacy journey. So what was it like for you? What were your reading habits and things as you were growing up?
Growing up, reading was normal to me. As a young scholar, my parents preached education, so I knew from the time that I came into this universe that education was going to be vital, it was going to be number one. When I was young, I saw my father reading every Sunday as a preacher's kid, and my mother was also a reader. So it was, I think kids emulate adults, and I was fortunate to be able to see both of my parents reading, and I was fortunate to pick up that habit from a young age as well.
Okay. What was your favorite book by chance? Just curious.
The Little Engine That Could.
Okay.
And the reason it was my favorite children's book growing up is because, and it still applies to me today, it's like the attitude of, I think I can, I believe, and understanding the power of self-belief and self-encouragement. So just the way that I think even now as an adult, I think I can. I believe that I can. Whatever it is that I set my mind to, I believe that it's possible as long as you have the faith and you're willing to put in the work. I believe that any goal that you have is achievable. So even at that age, I knew that those were some powerful words and powerful sentiments.
So earlier you spoke of your parents. Who would, in terms of reading and seeing them, who was your reading role model, and what were the things that they did that create that model for you?
100% my dad. I think that as a young boy, I wanted to be like my father and my big brother. And so by seeing my dad not only read in the pulpit, I think he's read other content as well, but that was what I remember the most, was him reading the Bible during the week, on the weekends, and especially on Sunday. So for me, it was normal to see this man who I admired and adored reading all the time. And until more recently, when I started to think about reading and the importance of literacy and getting into this work, it never occurred to me that that wasn't normal. I had always assumed that everyone read. I assumed that all parents, all kids, it was never this idea of, oh, well, you're a reader, or do men read, or do kids read, or do adults read? It was just so normalized by my father, rest his soul. He definitely put me on the right path to see that reading is essential.
Nice. And nice that, yeah, and it's important. The interesting thing I'm finding out is that, you know, there are people that don't have reading role models at all, or they did not have them growing up. So that it's nice to see and hear those stories of folks that do. So I wanted to talk to you about your article, The Challenge of Defeating Illiteracy in America. What happened that, you know, you were like, I need to put pen to paper and talk about this?
This past, so I'll go back to 2015, I was told that there were two things that I was told that really changed the course of my life, that ultimately ended up with writing the piece and starting I Love Books. The first was finding out that 2/3 of kids in low-income homes do not have a single book. And going back to what I just mentioned, I had no idea that that was the case at all. My career was in corporate. I had plenty of resources when I was growing up, even though I did not live a lavish life. I lived very modestly in Eastern Kentucky. But hearing that 2/3 of kids in this group who I could have fallen into easily didn't have the basics of tools that they needed to learn, I felt this burning desire and conviction to go change it. And the other piece of information that I found out was that kids who do not read at level by 4th grade, I think it's 2/3 are either going to prison or going to be on welfare. So it's almost like we know where they're going, and yet looking at these statistics, we're not doing anything. I couldn't believe that I was a grown man who had no idea that this was going on with millions of kids around the United States and beyond. So fast forward to this earlier this year when I founded I Love Books. Excuse me, the goal was to increase awareness. And I felt like, and still feel like, awareness is the biggest gap between where we are and where we need to be in terms of seeing the literacy rates improve and change. So I just decided to do some historical research. Like, why are we here? Growing up in Southeast Kentucky, I was not taught this history. And I don't believe it was to the fault of the educators per se. I think that that's just the nature of learning in the United States. There's a lot of history that's omitted. And I think we're seeing that now with critical race theory and some other concepts that are getting pushed back. So I wanted to say, okay, well, let's look at facts. Let's take the emotion out of it. Let's just look at data and say what actually happened to get to where 85% of 8th graders who are Black in the United States cannot read. How did we get here? So doing the research, I put the pen to the paper and decided to let people know why we're here in hopes of elevating the awareness and ultimately collaborating with others to create solutions.
So let's talk about I Love Books for a second. Can you explain what your organization is, what it does, and all those things?
Absolutely. In 2015, right around the same time that I discovered this information, I heard about a company called Tom's, which was a shoe brand that sold shoes. And every time they sold a pair of shoes, they gave a pair of shoes. And immediately I put the two together. It's like, that's it. That's the solution to this problem. If access to books is the issue, and we need to make sure that all kids have access to books in their home, the libraries, their schools, then we don't need to rely on donations. What we need to do is create a brand. And since I came from business, I was like, this is perfect for me. I'll just create what I call the brand of education, almost like the Nike of education. So I asked a few of my educator friends, is there a brand that represents your passion, your craft? And the answer was no across the board. So I said, well, I'll create it. And at the time I started a business, it was called Servanta, and it took me a little too long to figure it out as a new entrepreneur. A few years ago, I went back into corporate, reloaded in terms of knowledge, experiences, and resources. Fast forward to 2021, I was able to come back better, stronger, and create what you're seeing now, which is I Love Books. So we are in the same social entrepreneurship lane. We create bookish merch, and every time we sell our products, we give new books to kids. That simple. It's really no more complicated than that. My intention is to leverage commerce, leverage business to do good. So we give half of all of our net profits to either nonprofits or schools that are in need of books and may not have the ability to get them themselves. To date, we are almost at 1,000, but my vision is much, much bigger than what anyone will be able to see right now. So we're just going to keep marching towards ensuring truly all kids have their home libraries, their schools libraries are full. And that's what I Love Books is.
Where can people find your merchandise or your website?
ilovebooks.org. Yeah. And it's funny because when I think I woke up at around 2 o'clock in the morning last year, this is probably 2 or 3 months into the pandemic. And I was like, oh yeah, that's the name. And I went back and forth on .org versus .co because I didn't want to make people think it's nonprofit, but it does align with the mission. We do have a social cause with it. And if folks really don't want to use .org, they can also go to ilovebooks.co. ilovebooks.com, unfortunately, was taken, but you can catch us at ilovebooks.org or ilovebooks.co.
Okay. So one of the things, like, you're from corporate America and you're in kind of like you're in this literacy space now. What are some of the ideas that you're pressing or that you're hoping to get out, that people understand in terms of your concerns with literacy?
I believe that there's an awareness gap that we have to address before we can see the change that we want to see. Going back to what I was just saying, I had no idea. And I think that the people within the quote unquote education system, or those who have a vested interest in literacy, have made an incorrect assumption that people don't care, when that's not it. I really believe that it's people don't know. So I love books. When I wear this product, it breaks stereotypes immediately, because people will look at me like, you're not supposed to read because Black people don't read, Black men don't read, and so on and so forth. So raising that awareness to let the world know that, yes, we do read. There's a lot of us that are avid readers, and more so let the kids know that it's okay to read books. Like the idea that we're not supposed to be smart, or that you can only be a rapper or a trapper or an actor. The only way that we're going to be able to change that is through showing them something different. And one of the unique, at least I believe that one of the unique aspects about me in particular is that I came from this industry that did make a lot of money, and I'm happy to talk about it, and definitely not in an arrogant way or any type of self-serving way, but in a way that says, hey, I understand what it's like to grow up in an area that's not what you see on TV. And you wonder, how do I get from here to the house on the hill? And instead of criticizing the kids who want that life, show them a different way. And the way that I got this life was by being smart. And so I think the more of us who can show that, the more likely it is that we'll inspire kids to want to be engineers, want to be artists, want to be marketers, so on and so on, these different industries that they could go into and have a much different life than what they're living right now. And I think that it just starts with setting an example.
Why do you think, so for example, you say in your article, no political party advocates illiteracy, yet every party permits it. Why is literacy, which is like the foundation of every bit of communication, not more forefronted within our concerns?
I'll go back to the awareness thing. I think those who are aware, it's assumed that, let me go back. I think that some people believe we just don't care about education. And I'll speak from the Black man side. I think there are people who don't believe that it's important because of what they've heard, what they've seen, the narrative or the false narrative really that exists. So to me, it's one is the awareness side. And then two, when do you hear people talking about it on the mainstream? It's such a basic skill that a lot of us take for granted. And I'll continue to use myself as an example. I never thought about not being able to read because I've been reading since I was a child. So I believe that by increasing the awareness of the issue, we can force people into talking about it. And if we go back to the history of how we got here, which the article speaks to quite a bit, those in power during slavery knew that if their slaves were able to read, write, and think critically, they would begin questioning some of the teachings. They would begin to collaborate with one another to create solutions for themselves. The institution of slavery was at risk as the literacy rates improved for those who were enslaved. If you fast forward to today, it's the same exact thing. 82% of Black fourth graders do not read at level. There is no job on the planet in which you can fail, maybe a weather reporter, but there's no job on the planet that you can fail at that type of rate and still be in business. Just doesn't work. The problem to me is that it's accepted. We've accepted it, and I don't accept it. I know you don't accept it, and there's a bunch of other people who do not, but the mainstream has just kind of let it be what it is. But I think it's a national crisis. And I would argue that if this was the case for all children, it would be considered a national crisis. But because this has been going on for so long, the acceptance rate is too high. And that's what we're doing now, is saying, no, this isn't normal. This isn't necessary. We're going to change this, and we don't accept it. So that's my perspective on that front. I just feel like we have to continue to improve the awareness, increase the awareness, and let people know that 82% of kids, and we know where they're going. Like, we know that they're going to go to jail. We know that they're going to be on welfare. We know that they're going to end up in poverty. They're going to commit crimes. They may end up homeless. We know that. So to not do anything is to be complicit in this tragedy that's happening to our kids right now.
And what's interesting too is that as I started this work, I want to talk about the aspect of collaboration and collectivism, because I'm noticing, like, one of the things, we have researchers, we have teachers, we have community advocates, we have politicians, we have teachers, we have librarians, all working in isolation. Kind of, we'll work here for a minute and do a partnership, but I don't see collective advocacy and movement. If this is, you know what I mean? So yeah. Can you speak on what you've seen in terms of thinking differently about approaching literacy, or in that regard?
Yeah, I think I would agree. And I believe that when we look at problems or societal problems in general, we see that isolation happening. If you are on a team, so I've played sports since I was a kid. Collaboration is always necessary when you're playing something that like a team sport. I play football, basketball, and the idea of a team and having a common goal is normal to me. What I don't see happening, like to your point, is that being normal to these entities, because I don't necessarily think they've had to come together and collaborate for something of this magnitude. People who are fighting homelessness typically are fighting homelessness as a unit. People who are fighting crime as a unit. People who are fighting lack of education are fighting lack of education as a unit. And because literacy impact, I guess you could say, is impacted by all of that, or it impacts all of that, it's unique because it is an umbrella that covers all of it. When I think of illiteracy, it's a root cause. And I guess that's ultimately what it comes down to. I think of it as a tree. So if we think of homelessness, crime, violence, et cetera, as branches, illiteracy is at the root of it. Mm-hmm. So you have all of these folks, these entities that are fighting their individual branches, but no one's getting to the root. And I feel like that's what we're trying to establish through I Love Books and collaborations like we're doing, and other organizations that are putting in the work like that.
Yeah. So, like, I think about, because I'm in an academic institution, and I think about like the science of reading and all that I see and read. How is that getting to the teacher that doesn't get the funding that's truly needed? How is that getting to the librarian or community advocate and broken down in the way that they can use it? How are librarians thinking about training the trainer to do read alouds and do outreach? How are we have all these teachers that are leaving the profession. Like, how can they be used in different spaces? Because a lot of these people still care. It's just the bureaucracy that's killing them.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So how can we get teachers in different spaces, and use their gifts to help this? So that's kind of like where I see, like us thinking differently about collaborating. Like the researcher has to find some way to get to the parent. You
For
can't do
sure.
the science of reading and have this home life and a
Yeah.
librarian and there not be a connection. You know what I mean? And then the teacher's
Yeah.
there, but the teacher, it has to be more than one route of getting there, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, because you do need that direct access. And how do you get there? Now, I feel like that's where what we're talking about now is, what does that look like? What does the future look like when we have all of these organizations and these entities collaborating? And honestly, I don't know the answer right now. I believe that the business side of it certainly is my lane, but I feel like there is a way, and I do feel like we'll figure it out. But that's a great point. And I think there's a lot of frustration with the people who've been fighting this issue for a while, because there doesn't seem to be a ton of traction and results that have come through, we'll call it 10, 20 years. But I also see that people are committed to it. And through that commitment is what I believe will ultimately get us from where we're at today to where we're going to be in the future.
Wholeheartedly. I think too that with COVID and social media and technology like this, I think coalition building can happen differently, because through even my Instagram page, I'm meeting people who are doing, I'm like, people are doing amazing things with literacy, community groups, librarians, teachers, people in research are doing amazing things. We just don't know about it. Like,
Yeah,
we need to reach out and find a mechanism of which we can like intersect better. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? However that happens. But I just feel like kind of the walls just have to come down. You know what I
agreed,
mean?
agreed.
In your opinion, if we go back to, and there's issues too, like we know that even within the Black community, Black boys are going to hit harder with literacy and things of that nature. What needs to happen in terms of specifically looking at Black boys and rethinking how to engage them in literacy?
Yeah, that's that hits my heart, because I realized that my situation could have been very differently. And I attribute a lot of my lifelong success to having my dad involved in my home and raising me as a young man. And unfortunately, there are a lot of Black boys who don't have a father in their home. Only 2% of United States educators are Black males, so they don't get into classroom. A lot of Black men are working, creating, they've got their own families, so they may not get that energy in the community. So it's extremely difficult to see Black boys. I think the rate that I saw not too long ago was 90% of Black boys are not reading at grade level right now at fourth grade. And that's a staggering number, but it makes sense to me, because the thing that they need most is a man to teach them and raise them and show them that it's normal. And unfortunately, a lot of our kids are being raised by social media, by the media itself, entertainment, rappers, actors, again, the same. And it's very disheartening. But I do believe that the solution is men like myself, my friends, my brothers. We have to be intentional with starting with the basics. We've got to get Black boys reading. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is by giving them that time. And that is the most difficult asset for us to give up, is our time. So I believe that creating, or not even creating, but becoming more involved with organizations that are literacy based and being super intentional. We're pulled a lot of different ways because there's a lot of different issues. But going back to the root cause of it, illiteracy is the root cause. So I feel like we have to acknowledge that and then go to work on it. So instead of spreading our resources, let's bring those resources in to say the problem from 2021 until it's solved, the problem that we're going to focus on is illiteracy. The other things that we're trying to fight will improve if we get the literacy rates to improve. The health will improve, the education will improve, the crime rates will be better, the homelessness rates will be better. Everything else, it's a domino effect. But we've got to start with illiteracy, and it's got to start with us getting our time.
What's interesting too is like I'm a librarian and I've worked in a public library before. I've worked in a school library. And we, like within the profession, we're dealing with equity, diversity, and inclusion issues. And we understand, even in teaching, the importance of cultural responsiveness and meeting these kids, Black and brown kids, because we have our brown kids with language issues that aren't being met and things like that too, just as big of an issue. And we understand that these kids need to see mirrors of themselves. And we understand that, we need to have the books and things like that. But if your outreach isn't where they're at, like we have to think differently about outreach. Are you scared of these kids? If so, that's a problem. You know what I mean? Like if your policy is to kick kids out, how are you helping with literacy? Do you know what I mean? So it's to me, like we have to look at these different spaces and think, how can we rethink our relationships with Black boys, Black and brown boys and girls, even, to get them in, because a big piece of this too is relational. Do you know what I mean? Like, the kid's not going to trust you. Still, you can come at them with books, and you know what I mean? Like, where's the relationship, right? So it's to me too, like thinking about the relationship and that cultural competency, because the teaching profession is what, like 80% white. The library profession is 80% white.
Yeah, well, even at that, you go to, it's 80, I think it's 80% white women.
Yeah.
So you don't even have the male factor. And I think as an elementary school student, you may be able to bond as a Black or brown girl with a woman, but the Black boy, like you don't have that. And I'm pretty sure research shows that the most strained relationship in the public education system is white women and Black boys, which also makes sense. So how do you deal with that? And you can't change the humans who are doing their job, and it's not their fault for being their demographic, which goes back to the point I was just making. We've got to show up, and that to me is the step number one, is for Black men to be present. I
do think that's true, but I'm not going to let them off that easy. You know what I mean? There's a responsibility and an ethic of care. That's a part of that job. And, like there's a responsibility there for kids to get taught. And, like folks are just marking kids off. They don't read. They don't this. How do you know? How do you just by that one interaction? You got, what I mean? We got to dig deeper on something.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree. I think that it's difficult when there's the human element involved. So any human biases, that come around, there are people who will support someone who is very clearly a racist individual, for example, and then they're going into the classroom the next day. And so how would we expect that person to change their beliefs and their mindset? Like for them, it could be a power trip, because you can plant a seed in a Black boy at kindergarten who is bright, who is ahead of the curve, who's incredible. And then by third grade, they're behind. To your point, they're listed off there because you've now taught them that they are not what they could be. You've lowered your standards for them, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of power for the public educator. Like the public educator has a lot of power, and that power could be used for good and it could be used for bad. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, as it pertains to Black boys, it's easier to look at their behavior and blame it on them and not say, well, it's a kid, like they're a kid, they learn differently. We have to adjust. And I think that there is a sentiment or a belief in the public education system that we're overworked, we're underpaid. And so the desire to do the craft, it feels like it's changing. There's a lot of issues in that. And the people who feel it the most, unfortunately, are the kids. They're the ones who lose the most. And yeah, so I'm with you. And I don't have an answer to that one. I really don't, because to change that component, you'd have to change the people. And the only way that I know how to change people is through inspiration. So hopefully this awareness that we're doing and the work that we're doing will inspire people to see something differently.
And we know that, and we're not saying all teachers are this way or all librarians are that way, but we know that there are people who do not understand the cultural relevance of what people need. And that becomes an issue. Even with the best intentions, these things happen, right? So we're not sweeping all people by means, but we do recognize that these issues do exist. So I also wanted to talk to you about how do we think differently about collaborations? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that, so if I think about 2022, what I would love to see in 2022 is a United States literacy campaign. And everybody who has a vested interest in seeing this literacy or illiteracy and the problems that it causes, I want us to all be on one accord. So let's have the funding component, the book component, the policy component, establish some goals, and then go to work. I think that's the only way that I can see people coming together, is to have that common goal and everyone know what the common goal is at a macro level. And then on a micro level, everyone can do their individual parts. But I think having a big literacy campaign would be the way to get the optimal collaboration amongst people, organizations, and entities that have a desire to see illiteracy ended. And I feel like that's hopefully what we're going to be able to get to, but that's definitely something that I believe can be a game changer.
Most definitely. And I think too, when people think about collaboration, that there's different ways to collaborate. There's networks, there's coalitions, there's movements. And we really have to think about that. Because for me, I think I'm a networking person. Like, I will introduce this person to that person. And that's a skill, and that has to be considered within this. But then there are people who are really like coalition building, like, here's the issue, bring these groups together. And then, like, there's the movements where, like, we're going to protest for this and like, so there's different ways to think about collaborating. And I think that, like, we really need to find that, to understand that, for those that are interested, and bring that collective together and work in that way. You know what I mean? That's something I see as well. I think too, for us, I think it's thinking about your sphere of influence. Everybody, so like, sometimes you get in this and you're like, we need this miracle plan or something, but it's like, what can you change where you are?
Yeah.
What can you change? Because if you do that, that's the drop in the bucket, right? And that's another thing. But then it's like, if you need somebody that you heard about that's over here in Philadelphia that's doing this, or that, that person that writes policy over there or something, and you create this network, like, that's the help that supports these smaller efforts. So it's like, where are these like business people and community people that know how to do this marketing and stuff that, like, we need for this,
Yeah, so here, what I think this is interesting too. So I have a lot of friends that are extremely talented at what they do, but that's what they do. And to pull them away, you'd have to be able to compensate them in the same way that they're being compensated now. And the companies that are paying them pay them really well. So where does the money come when you're trying to do this work? That to me is the number one barrier. I was just telling one of my friends the other day. It's like, if my goal is to be able to create something where I can tell my closest 5 male friends, like these are people I call my brothers, whatever you're getting paid right now, I'm going to pay you. But your job title is going to be reader in chief. That's what you're going to do. Every day you wake up, your goal is to help kids read better, specifically Black boys. That to me would be incredible, but it's going to take time for someone like me. I'm building this thing by myself. I know that it's going to take time, and I've put myself in a position to be able to give that time. But most of us, because now you're getting into the finance part of it. So if you are living paycheck to paycheck, it's a lot more difficult for you to be able to leave and go do this type of work. And I think that's ultimately where the challenge is the people, to your point, the question that you're asking, where are the people? They're definitely there. And I happen to be one of those folks that I look at myself as a professional problem solver. Mm-hmm. That's what these companies have paid me since I finished my MBA and started working in corporate. They've paid me to solve their problems. The only difference between what I'm doing now and what I was doing before is that my intention is no longer to solve their problems. It's to solve this problem. Yeah. Multiply the me times 100,000 or 10,000 or whatever number it could be. That's a major, major win. But it's going to take time to be able to get to that. And I feel like that could be applicable across the board for a lot of different issues that we see. Yes. The people who are trained in it are doing the same thing, but for something else.
But here's what I see. Killer Mike and Candace Owens can create a forum and have people talking about it on social media forever. Mm-hmm. Tavis and Cornel West can get on there and have a tour and slam Obama for days, and it's a huge thing. Where are we at for one of the most important causes that we can have for our community? Where are we? Where is that?
Looking for the next piece of entertainment, perhaps. And I feel like that's ultimately what it is. We're very distracted. And not just Black people, not just talking about literacy, just as a culture. And not even Black culture, like as Americans, as humans right now, these devices, as great as they can also be a hindrance. And it's very easy to go down these rabbit holes of entertainment. Somebody can get on TikTok and be on there for 2 hours, and that's 2 hours that could have been going towards solving a problem. Or someone could be messing around on Facebook or Meta or whatever you like to call it. And it's someone could hear a news article where I feel like a lot of us to some degree are addicted to negativity, and we want to see the negativity. We want to see the drama. Unfortunately, for a lot of us Black people in America, we are dealing with trauma as well, unaddressed trauma, which feeds that negativity. That's what makes us want to see it. And it's so many layers to it. I will give whoever made this plan back in the day to get to where this is the struggle. It was a brilliant plan. Like, they knew if they made us think differently, that they wouldn't have to put us in whips and chains. It was just we know what you're going to do based on what we've made you think.
Yes. But what's interesting too, is that we had communities who was like, I'm going to make sure they can read, even if it's hot, even if it's, like, in the cellar of the church, bring your crew and we're going to read. I'm going to teach you to read. And one person taught the other. You know what I mean? And it was something, and it meant something, and we do have those people without a doubt.
For sure.
But we need to think about that differently, because people have gifts and within their sphere of influence, I think, share that gift. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I'll say this too. One day LeBron James is going to throw on an I Love Books hat. I don't know when, but one day he's going to. And one day Drake is going to have an I Love Books hoodie on. That's when the culture changes. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, they have influence. Their sphere of influence is very different than mine. No one cares about what I'm doing right now yet. But one day when those who have that type of power, they're going to change it. And that's part of my plan, is to help them understand, because I don't know that LeBron knows he's a best-selling author, but he may not know that kids don't have books and what that does. He may not have been educated in that yet. But if we can connect those things and just move this into the culture, Earn Your Leisure, for example, they have highlighted financial illiteracy. They have been able to sit down with the Rick Rosses of the world, the Master P's of the world, the Dame Dashes of the world. And they've gotten an audience that is global, talking about something as simple as money. But the way that they do it is unique, because when you see them or you hear them, they're talking like us. Yeah. They look like us. So even with I'm launching the I Love Books podcast very soon. It'll be coming out. The first episode will release this month. And that's going to be the same. It's going to be a very similar concept. Let's just have a conversation with people, because we can bring those same folks on. Rick Ross is a best-selling author, but who's asking him about his books? And that's Rocklit 101 just released CC Sabathia's book not too long ago. Right. We cannot ask we cannot, let me say it differently. I do not expect people to come to me. I expect to have to go to people. I cannot change the way the culture is set up, but I can acknowledge that the culture is the culture and do something about it. So to me, that's what the next step is bringing it mainstream. Because if LeBron starts talking about books like this, then the world will take notice that, oh, this is what's happening. I didn't know. Now we need to do something. So that's really what I see in the future as well.
Okay. Well, we have some guests, and if you wanted to chime in on anything, you can please unmute yourself and please share your thoughts or questions or anything like that you'd want to share.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm one of Johnny's friends, Elena. So I know I've heard a lot of this, but I'm kind of just curious, what are you excited for next? Let's share most next thing you're excited about.
Hey, Elena, are you talking to me? I'm assuming.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yes, you first. Yes, and then Tiffany, I would love to hear as well what you're excited about next too.
So on a local level, I'm very excited about our next books giving. And I should have mentioned, so I Love Books, the way that we give away our books, we call it Books Giving. And we do that at the end of every month or every quarter. And we are partnering with some of the local businesses in Lexington to make it the biggest one yet. So on that front, I'm very excited. And then I'm also very excited about the I Love Books podcast, because I believe that it's going to really help people who may not love books. They may want to love books, but they don't. They may want to get the information from books, but they don't have time to read, or they don't enjoy reading. And I feel like it's going to be the intersection of books and culture. So I'm extremely excited about being able to give this knowledge that I've acquired from reading all of these books back to the people, so that they can change their lives the way that my life has been changed because of the plethora of books, especially the mind books that I've been reading lately. They really have changed my life. And so I'm extremely excited to make that happen. Thank you for joining. Thank you for asking. I appreciate you.
Wholeheartedly. Thank you so much.
And you too, Tiffany. I'm excited. What are you excited about?
I am excited about networking. I think when you think about your place within trying to create change, like what can you do? Like I might not be the teacher that does this, or, I might not be the researcher who will have this article that millions of people cite, but I would love to introduce the person that I met over here to this person over here to create something big. So I want to create a space for networking, and I want to meet people, and I want to continually try to bring people together to try to make a difference. So I think that's something that I have to share within this. What about you, Elena? What are you excited about in terms of this?
Oh goodness. Well, first of all, I understand why now you call yourself the connector, and that's just such an important role to match people to the right people. I think that is where a lot of things get unlocked. So that's amazing that that's for your next step too. I think for me, I'm just so excited to continue to see us as Black people just in different settings and having different stereotypes being broken and characteristics that our young ones get to see us in. So what I'm excited about is the continuation of seeing more of us in different ways so that the next generation can continue to see us being successful, being happy, being joyful, going towards our passions in different ways than what they're seeing every day. And it's the stuff that both of you all were talking about earlier. It's just really it just keeps my inspiration going. And I'm excited to hopefully contribute in my own little way in that way too, but you're definitely doing that work to help that. So that's what I'm excited about.
That's awesome. And like I said, here's another great story of somebody who's excited, you know what I mean, to move the story forward. And I appreciate that. Jocelyn, if you wanted to jump in, please do so. We'd love to hear from you.
As a elder, I am so excited to hear the enthusiasm, the love, the passion of wanting to make this change. I guess the other part that I'm looking at is how do we bring people like me, the old guard anarchists who helped teach this generation to read, who raised this generation of young firebrands. How do we re-engage and say, hey, my work isn't done. So how do we re-engage and put back more of ourselves, our blood, our sweat, our tears into this, the generation, basically our grandkids or grandkids' age, and produce the things that you need. I mean, some of us have money, some of us have time, some of us have influence. And how do we re-engage that to help? I mean, some of it will be politically, some of it will be financially, some of it will be spiritually, and some of it is just flat out getting, I have books, how do I get these books that I've read, that I've loved, into the hands of another generation so that they don't go to waste, that they don't go into a landfill. So how do I create a local branch of I Love Books, or how do I reach out? So I think it's interesting and it's fascinating to figure out ways to get people back into engagement so that we're marching hand in hand again versus, hey, it's on you young folks, I done my share. No, we all have to re-engage. And that's what I've been thinking. That's why I've been putting up the thumbs and the hearts, and the claps, because I'm so happy to hear this. And while I was listening to you, I went to your LinkedIn, I went to your Instagram. So now I'm going to start pushing you through my networks and going, hey, these people are doing great. And I'm not going to denigrate you by saying these are kids. I'm going to say these are adults who are making a way for all of us to move forward. And you can stand on my shoulders, because that's how I got ahead, is I stood on the shoulders of my parents and my grandparents who were working in those fields. I need to put you up on my shoulders so that you can get ahead. And that's all I got.
But that's amazing though. And that's a very valid point. And as like the grays over here are showing, I'm changing, I'm heading into that phase. And what I'm realizing now is that, like the Jonathans of the world are going to be the hype people that are going to be moving this. And but we have a lot of knowledge, and we have a lot of bumps and bruises along the way that, we can impart to the Jonathans of this world, because, you know, he's going to take the baton and run, right? So it's to thinking about, like, you know, like that mentoring differently. How can I help him? I saw his website, and, you know, like, I immediately reached out. I was like, yes, because people need to see him. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And there's a whole lot more of him out there that need to be seen. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So
I
those,
totally agree. And the other part of that is where we, you know, maybe it's, you know, even if it's a small amount, like $5 a month, $10 a month, you know, start doing those membership things. You know, okay, I love Audible, but maybe I can throw him, you know, the $10 or $5 a month to help him fund. Um, my husband and I, we raised 3 young men, and we made them go do homeschool summer school every year. But people taught me how to do that. So how do we get into this where we teach other people how to homeschool their kids during the summer and make them read and make them do things so that they know that academics is just as important as sports, just as important as anything else, so that they're healthy mentally, physically, and financially, so that they could do these things. I'm all for what you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you invited me to this webinar, and thank you from the bottom of my heart.
oh, we need you here. You are meant to be here. And the important, I like how you said that one of the biggest things I'm learning through navigating through this literacy field is this larger population of Black homeschooling parents, Black and brown homeschooling parents. How are we meeting? And they're doing great things. Teach other people, those great homeschoolers, or how are you using the library to help facilitate, you know, like, we're that cross-pollination of that teaching the teacher type thing, but like, that's a powerful community. A, why is this happening? And we know, but B, like, what are their networks and how can they be supported better? I don't want it to be public school versus homeschool. People have one shot to educate their child. How can we support each other better?
My kids went to public school because I felt that that would be the way for them to get the broadest range of people that they could impact. But every summer they got 2 weeks off to sleep in, do whatever. And then they went into mom and dad's program where we made them study the books of the grade that they were going to go into.
Yes.
And we took the answer key out the books, and they had to give us homework. They had to give us laps. They hated me. They hated me until they hit high school. And then it was like, oh, Dad, we didn't realize how much easier the next grade was, because for a month they could float because they already knew the concepts. We never let their brains run out of their ears. And so, but people taught me that. And so it's just, how do we figure out a way to pass that baton, not just to the Jonathans, but to the, you know, the younger mothers, and maybe they just need some help where somebody's reading, you know, look at LeVar Burton. He's reading nighttime stories to kids online. How do we get more people to do that?
Yeah, there's a guy named Mr. Billy, and he's in Las Vegas libraries. He's amazing read aloud. We need to find a way to get him to teach people to do read alouds, because he's amazing. But two, oh, I cannot remember the point now, but like you were saying, what was it with the homeschool? Oh, I can't remember now. That's what happens.
When we cheat, and you know, they used to hate me for it, but they'd go into the next, and the teachers,
oh, that's what it was.
So intelligent, and I'm sitting there going, they just didn't. And I just didn't let them rot over the summer.
Right,
but do something.
But there's been research and professors that are out here doing that for math and calculus to get our Black and brown kids into college, because they know that calculus and is the key, right? So they're doing those summer programs that prep them. The same thing that you're talking about. We're not, you know, like, this stuff isn't new. We need to talk to each other differently about, like, you know, and the exposure of this, you know what I mean? Yes. So we have 5 minutes left. And before we do that, I wanted to shout out that We Are Here Lit started a Slack channel. So if you are interested in continuing any conversation, whether it be, I need a book for my 8-year-old, I'm a community literacy specialist. Like I want you to publicize my organization, or I want to meet with other organizations. If you're a researcher that wants to talk research, if you're a teacher, whatever you want, there is a channel for you to talk. If you want to discuss an article, let's put it up there and talk about it. I put Jonathan's article on there. So all you have to do is email me your email address through any of the We Are Here literacy sites, whether it be the Instagram, Twitter, the actual website, weareherelit.org. Shoot me your email so we can start coalition building, because within that space, you might meet the person that can help you do what you need to do. And if it gets big enough, I'll push it somewhere else. This is not for me to get anything but to push the movement forward. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to get the conversation started and for people to meet people. So if you have an interest in talking literacy, even if you have a question, I've been lending my library services out. You have a kid that needs to read a book, or you're a parent having a problem with this, come to the Slack channel. Let's talk. Let me see if we can find your kids some books, because that's what I do, So find me through messaging at We Are Here Lit. Send me your information, and let's find you a space that you can meet and get the information that you need. Jonathan, while we have you here, please push your organization and your podcast and all that stuff before we head off.
Well, thank you, Tiffany, for the opportunity. I certainly appreciate that and everything you're doing. Miss Jocelyn, thank you. And truly, book love is what I call it, but true love to you and all the people who've paved the way for us to be even having this conversation right now.
Yes.
You talked about standing on the shoulders. I'm very much aware that I'm privileged because I did not have to go through what my parents and grandparents and everyone else had to go through in order for me to become educated, for me to be able to do the work that I do. So that is not lost, and I'm very grateful for you, even though it's my first time seeing you in life, but it is not my first time knowing that people like you exist and being grateful for everything that you've done to put us in this position to be able to do what we're doing now. So thank you very much. And Elena, thank you as well. I appreciate you taking time to hop on. Definitely appreciate you. ilovebooks.org. You see the hoodie. I got the backpacks. It's what Master P would do if he was promoting something. So I'm gonna do the same. We got the backpacks. And really, this is my job. I left my corporate career and I'm going to build something special. I cannot do that alone. So thank you to everyone who may be watching this and buy something. I am on a mission. My mission is to end illiteracy book by book. And I'm 100% committed to this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Book love to everybody out there.
Yes, and I want to thank everybody who stopped through, and let's do this work. If you want me to publicize your work on We Are Here Lit, especially if you're working with Black boys, please get in touch. I'm on social media. We need to put you on. We need to, network you to get your voice heard, because that's all it is getting these voices heard in the long run. So I want to thank everybody for coming out, and we'll see you the next time. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Pause. And end. All right. I'll pause the recording. Thank you so much, Jocelyn.
You're welcome.